rock star, Rockstar. You are the most rock star of any songwriter I've ever known. You're an artist in your own right, but I'm just saying this guy's a rock star. You welcome Desmond Child, one of the greatest songwriters in history, in any genre, in any language. I'm always honored to be in your presence, Desmond, and we're going to do several iconic songs. Today's episode of Story Behind the Song for the Tennessean and Tennessean.com, I Was Made for Lovin' You. Paul Stanley and you wrote it for Kiss, or it ended up getting recorded by Kiss.
In the 1970s, I had my first band called Desmond Child and Rouge. And I sang with three beautiful women, and we played all the little clubs in New York, like Reno Sweeney, Trax, The Bottom Line. And Paul Stanley used to come and hang out with us backstage. I didn't even know that much about Kiss. I thought Kiss was for like little kids.
Right.
And he said, let's try writing a song for Kiss. And a few months later, I'm hearing the song we wrote on the radio. I didn't even know it was out. And it became #1 in 23 countries within weeks. I Was Made for Lovin' You.
I'm a little bit of a Kiss fan. That's absolutely my favorite Kiss song. Urban legend says you set out to write a disco song. True or no?
That's not really how it was, because in those days I was trying to combine dance music, R&B, with rock and kind of singer-songwriter storytelling to create something different. So I knew that dance clubs were really making it really big all over. There are all these huge gay dance clubs. And I said, come on, let's try to do something with a dance beat, but let's put heavy rock guitars on it. So that was the innovation that I hoodwinked Paul into. Gene always hated it from beginning to end, hated. But it was so...
Till he cashed the checks from the live performances.
He cashed the checks, but I mean, just last year we had a movie come out called Why Him?
Right.
And that song was like all over it. So I think maybe he's, kind of resolved himself to the fact that it's probably one of their biggest hits of all time.
It certainly has. I travel a lot internationally. Everywhere I go, they're playing that song. Everywhere I go, they are still playing that song.
Where's my check?
Well, I will say this. You sort of started, obviously, Desmond, there were songwriters who weren't in the band that wrote a song with the band, but not so much in those days. And right after this, I think Bon Jovi's people hear about the success that you'd had with Paul, and you start getting the call from rock bands, and why not bring in this craftsman that knows what they're doing? That really started a wave, though, didn't it?
Well, I owe a lot to Paul Stanley because he gave my number to John Bon Jovi. Bon Jovi was the opening act for Kiss in Europe.
Right.
They were still a very young band. And Paul said, you should try writing a song with Desmond. And so I get this call, and I go out to New Jersey, and I go out to this house where Richie Sambora still lived at home with his parents.
And we're not going to say too much about that because we're going to do another episode on that song.
Okay.
This is sort of the first in a series, but it did start this thing of people going, you know what? There are these craftsman songwriters. There are these great songwriters such as you. And maybe we start taking it a little outside of just two bandmates writing these songs.
Well, in those days, I wasn't anything. I just had my group, Desmond Child and Rouge, and we got a deal at Capitol Records. And so it was more just like friends getting together. But from the minute that I had this hit with Kiss, my whole life changed. Right. And in a way, I carved out a career that no one else had. Because in the old days, bands were forbidden to write with outside writers. Maybe the producer might, in the studio, might suggest something, and then they put their name on the song. But to be someone that came in from the outside like me and almost joined the band for that period of time, I started going from, Kiss to Bon Jovi, Aerosmith, Rat.
Yeah.
I became the kind of silent member of all these bands for the period of time where we were writing for that album.
Well, I would certainly see. I love Rouge, by the way. I would suggest that people go check that out. Do you remember the day you wrote the song with Paul? What was that like? Do you remember the actual who had the idea? Take us through that part of the story.
I went to SIR to a KISS rehearsal. And
in L.A.?
No, in New York City.
In New York, okay.
And they had this huge soundstage with, mountains of Marshall amps and all the guitars and everything. They were getting ready for a big tour. And there was a beautiful grand piano off to the side. And they took a lunch break, and Paul and I went over to the piano. And I had this little bit of a start, which were the chords and the melody to the verse. And it had the kind of like this triumphant, tonight, I'll give it all to you. It's kind of like a gallant kind of.
It's theatrical to me.
It was very theatrical, and the line, I was made for you, and girl, you were made for me, and I was made for you, came out of that session, and then Paul went into the studio, and along with their producer Vinny Poncia, they just like built on that. And, kind of revved up the chorus, which is the signature part of the song. So I can't take credit for that, but...
Yeah, but it's... You were there all the way. It's a hell of a song. To this day, I just think, I do my 50 greatest hits of each decade. There's a big argument for that song, man. There is a huge argument for it. And there was nothing else to me like it. And I think earlier you said you had drawn on these different blends and the dance beat, which was not KISS, but it just, to this day, when it comes on the radio, Desmond, I jack that volume up.
Well, it's one of those special songs, and it was destiny for me, because that, Paul helped me to launch everything good that happened to me after that. Last year, I was honored with the ASCAP Founders Award, and Paul Stanley gave this beautiful introduction. But before the introduction, there was this medley of my songs and the songs I had collaborated with, and the last one was I Was Made for Loving You. So I had this wonderful singer, Justin Benlolo, who's 21 years old, and at the end he's singing those really high parts, and just like, and so I didn't tell Justin that Paul was going to be at the show. So Paul is waiting in the wings, and he's looking at Justin, and Justin's wailing with these high notes, and I can see like Paul looking at him kind of wryly, and and all of a sudden he starts walking out, and Justin catches sight of him and like, oh my God, he just turned completely red. Then Paul goes up to the mic and he says, well, I'm glad one of us can sing those high notes.
Well, I've heard Gene Simmons say that's why he doesn't like to do it, because that's his kind of part, isn't it, when they do it live? The
What?
O part.
No, that's all Paul.
Oh, is it all Paul?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was all Paul, and he was singing kind of in that Led Zeppelin kind of style. So that was really, really funny, and I was so honored that he gave the most loving introduction to me. And, some of the things that he said is like, and Alice Cooper showed up and did the opening number, and he said, Desmond Child is the 80s.
Well, that's flattering, but you are much more than that, Desmond. You are...
Well, soon I'll be in my 80s.
You are in many songwriter halls of fame. You are part of our culture. Your songs are not just hit songs. They're songs beyond generational. And even this one, every time I hear, that song come on the radio, everybody of every age in the car starts singing along, and you just have to turn it up. I was made for
that makes me so happy.
One other thing, well, as we tape this, which is in February of 2019, you just came back from New York City. You got to do something really special. What was that?
I was asked to do a very prestigious concert for Lincoln Center's American Songbook. And it's one of the most beautiful settings in the Appel Room overlooking Columbus Circle. and I did an entire show, 90 minutes of my music with special guest star Lena Hall. She's a Tony winner for Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Tabitha Fair, Justin Benlolo sang, and Bette Sussman was the musical director. And it was like heaven. It just, everything turned out great. And I've been studying all year long. I've been, because I knew I was going to do this gig, so I've been studying with Wendy Parr, studying my voice, and I came through. I sang amazing, like never before. So even at my age, it just shows if you put the work into it. It's never say never. Look at Tony Bennett. He sings like he's 20 years old. I just love that. And there really shouldn't be an age limit to music, because music is eternal. And so, us musicians and creators, we have to continue creating to the end, because that's why, God gave us that gift.
Well, we're going to talk about some more performances, huge ones you have on the horizon, in another episode. And I want to thank you for allowing us to do so many of your iconic hits. I Was Made for Lovin' You is the story behind the song this week for the Tennessean and Tennessean.com.